All right, guys, welcome everybody. This is You've Got Options for Income Navigator. Today is Friday, October 11th, 2024. So happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a couple of different strategies that I use in my trading, specifically ES, 1-1X bear traps. Uh, these trades, as you probably already know, they use span margin, which provides a lot of leverage, which could be a good thing and a bad thing, depending on, how you're using the leverage that you get. Could be a great thing if you are responsible. It could be an absolute disaster if you aren't responsible. So, but do be aware that strategies we're going to discuss today will have short naked options. If this is your like first time ever looking at this stuff and considering doing these trades, I highly suggest that you paper trade, that you maybe monitor and just look at how these will work over time, so that you get an idea about how these trades would perform, or how would your P&L would act in different market environments and so on, before you consider placing live trades. Now, I do want to talk about 1-1X, and the reason why I call it a 1-1X is because this is a 1-1-2, right? But we don't all have to do a 1-1-2 in this ratio like I did before. You can do a 1-1-3, you can do a 1-1-5, you can do a 2-2-6, whatever that ratio is, right? That's the trade that you're going to do. But they all start with a 1-1, right? Because unless you're going to change the ratio of longs to shorts in the put debit spread part of the trade, right? I'm assuming that the put debit spread is always going to have an equal amount of long options with the short options. So that makes it a 1-1. Now, whatever you're going to have on the other side or farther out of the money is up to you. That's why I left it as X. So it's a 1-1X. You decide how many naked options you're going to sell to finance that 1-1 or the put debit spread. Uh, I see Thomas coming in. I'm going to let him in, and just give me 1 second. All right. So I'm going to talk briefly about the 1-1-2, what I did with it, how I changed it. Um, and, hopefully you can follow along. If you have been a member for some time, you should be familiar with what a 1-1-2 trade is. And I'm going to talk about what I did to it to, I guess, improve it or make it a little bit better than what it was. All right. So let me first talk about what my trade used to be. So before, this is probably going back prior to early August, right? So the idea for the trade was to buy an out of the money put debit spread and finance this put debit spread by selling further out of the money naked puts. The ratio was typically a 1-1-2, meaning one put debit spread financed by a sale of two naked puts farther out of the money. My put debit spreads were somewhere around maybe 30 to 35 delta. They were 50 points wide. I would try to pay, somewhere around maybe $10 to $12 for that 50-point wide put debit spread. And I would sell two naked puts for about the same price as I am paying for the put debit spread. And if I'm selling two puts naked, right? Let's say I bought a put debit spread for $10 and I'm selling two naked puts for $10. So the first naked put for $10 goes to pay off the cost of the put debit spread, and the second naked put for $10, that's where my income would come from. My go-to, not adjustment, but one way I would start to close out of the trade or to harvest the trade, I would close out the naked puts at about, maybe 80, 85 to 90% of its max profit. So if I sold naked puts for 10, I would look to buy them back for somewhere between two, maybe to $1 debit. right? That little debit that I'm paying to close out the naked puts would, decrease my income portion of this trade, but they would also leave the put debit spread fully paid for, right, for the remainder of the time that was left in that trade. My trade would typically start. I used to do a lot of 52 DTEs using SPX options. I also did a bunch of trades in ES, starting the trade at about 60, 70, even as high as 90 DTE. What I did notice is that when I started trades somewhere around 60 DTE, I was able to, in a normal market, right, where volatility was coming down over time, and I was able to close out my naked puts with about 18 to maybe 25 days left until expiration. So that would leave the put debit spread with maybe 3 to 4 weeks to potentially hedge some of my newer trades. I would put these trades on every single week. The problem, and I, didn't realize that this was as big of a problem because, these trades worked for so long and so well. And I always thought that after I close out my naked puts, the leftover put debit spread was going to hold things together and provide a hedge to a certain degree for the newer trades. And it did until, right, the market either went down a lot or volatility really spiked. And I realized that the leftover put debit spreads, especially if the market or if the volatility isn't falling as fast, like if you are in a market environment where volatility is going from high, right, relatively speaking, from high to low, the naked puts are going to come off pretty fast, right? Leaving that put debit spread for maybe longer than 20 days until expiration to hedge some of the other newer trades. But if you are in the market environment where volatility is not coming down, but maybe it's staying relatively flat or rising, it takes longer, right, for the naked puts to decay, which means that if I'm putting on new trades every single week, I am now piling on new trades, but I have no naked puts coming off. So I'm kind of left with not enough or no hedges for the new trades. And what I realized is that uh, in early August, when volatility blew out, I think I had maybe 8, maybe 10 tranches on of the 1-1-2 trades. I had only about, I think I had 4 put debit spreads left over. And so having 8 1-1-2s with only 4 put debit spreads, hedging those 1-1-2s was clearly not enough, nowhere near enough. They did their job to a certain degree, but it wasn't enough. So instead of scrapping the whole thing, um, I said, okay, so what do I wish I had, right? What would help me the most back in early August? And the answer, in my opinion, the answer is pretty clear: is more hedges. Hedges to what, right? Like, what am I hedging? Well, I needed to hedge some of the newer 1-1-2s, right? And I just needed to increase the number of the leftover put debit spreads. So how do I do that? I can, spend some of the income from the trades that I'm putting on and that I'm taking off, and just flat out buy far out of the money put debit spreads. And that's going to put a little drag on performance overall, right? Because put debit spreads are going to be a debit transaction. So if you're spending, week after week or however often you want to place these hedges, it's all going to, add up to quite a bit over time. Well, I don't really want to do that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to have the put debit spreads and have them fully paid for. Kind of when I set up a 1-1-2 and then, waiting for maybe 60% of the time to roll off the clock, close out the naked puts and leave the put debit spreads left over, but having them left over for only, 3 or 4 weeks and only four put debit spreads hedging eight newer 112s, that's not enough. I would rather have eight put debit spreads hedging four 112s, right? So maybe the ratio is like 2 to 1, something like that. The more, the better, in my opinion. But having eight put debit spreads hedging four 112s and the put debit spreads have more than 18 days until expiration, that's where I want to be. So as a trader, your job is to go back, review what you're doing, what results are like, figure out what is working, what isn't working, and make adjustments to your strategies, right, to improve your strategies over time. And that is what I'm trying to achieve here. So the first trade I want to talk about is a 112, except this is the same structure, one put debit spread financed by a sale of two naked puts, except what I'm doing here is I am going to separate my put debit spreads and the naked puts, and I'm going to take advantage of the fact that options that have less time until expiration are normally decay at a faster rate than those that have more time until expiration. Now, I do know that we can talk about the times such as right now where volatility is replacing the theta component of out of the money option premium, and I get all that. But normally, right, quote unquote, in a normal market, options that have less time until expiration are going to decay faster than those that have more time until expiration. So what I'm going to do is I am looking at placing my put debit spreads farther out in time. And this could be, 120 days. It could be 90 days. It could be 150 days. I like the 150 days to start. And, this could change over time, right? I can add more time to it. And you'll see why in just a little bit. But as a guide, right? And I want you to take this, you know, as a guideline. This is not, if I said 150 DTE, that means you cannot do this trade if there's 156 DTE. It doesn't matter. What matters most is that you're placing your put debit spreads farther out in time, and you're going to sell your naked puts closer in time until expiration. So as a guide, right, I'm looking at a 150 DTE, and I'm going to go from a 50 point wide put debit spread to a 100 point wide put debit spread. Does it have to be 100? No. If you wanted to do 200, go ahead. If you wanted to do 300, go ahead. It doesn't matter, right? It all will have the gives and the takes. It's for you to, analyze this and figure out what works best for you, for your current scenario, for your risk profile, for your directional outlook, and so on. I'm just showing you what I'm doing. If anybody out there does not agree with what I'm doing, there's always the other side of that trade. So feel free. Or if you have some sort of different ideas, there's a Discord chat where you can share your ideas. We could discuss, debate, not argue, but we can go back and forth and try to figure out what is best for everyone. So here's an idea, right? This is a trade that I did 11 days ago. And given that, the underlying, which is ES, has moved about just shy of a half of one standard deviation to the upside, clearly this is working in my favor. 11 days have rolled off the clock. I have 19 days in this trade left. The short puts that I had placed at about 30 DTE, they're now a delta 4, maybe 5. We can look at the original price was 13. So they lost about half of their value and they still have 19 days to go. The most I can possibly make here, not accounting for if we move much lower, but I know that if I hold these naked puts through expiration, I have max potential of $625. Now, after these puts will expire, this will leave me with a put debit spread that is 100 points wide. And right now it's 140 DTE. I have 19, so let's call this 20 days until expiration. 20 days from now, when and if this 5350 two naked puts expire, this will leave me with a 100 point wide put debit spread with 120 days until expiration. So that improves my position, right? Because before I would have both naked puts and put debit spreads in the same expiration. And by the time the naked puts would expire, that would leave me with a put debit spread, but it only had very little time left until expiration. And it was about, maybe 5% out of the money. So now moving my naked puts closer in time, there's two sides, right? The good and the bad. So the good is these puts are going to decay pretty fast. Like if I was to sell naked puts in the same 150 DTE, it would take a lot longer than 30 days for them to lose all of their value. Yes, I probably would be able to place them farther out of the money in 150 DTE, but putting the naked puts at 30 DTE, they decay faster, which is the benefit. But what's the bad side, right? Or what's the not so good part about this? Placing naked puts with 30 DTE, they're a lot more sensitive to price changes, and they're a lot more sensitive to volatility, right? So if volatility spikes in the next 2 weeks, I only have 30 days. And inside of the next 2 weeks, if volatility spikes and the market goes down, pretty significantly, right? I only have 2 weeks left to fix this position, right? So, and I'm starting to now run out of time to fix my position. So I don't have as much time to eventually be right. I need to act on it a little bit faster, right? There's and my P&L is going to move a lot more with short naked puts being at 30 DTE. So we need to be aware of that. And, as far as the plan for this trade, number one, right? And this is going based on some back testing. And, I don't give the back testing um, uh, confidence of 100% ever to any back testing tool because I think there are flaws in everything. And but the idea, so I looked real quick on, and using SPX options, and this was option Omega, and the idea was to look at selling naked puts at around 7 to 10 delta, 30 days out. I didn't really look at any stop losses. I was just interested to see how long would it take for that naked put to lose 90% of its value. And the answer is it took about 21 to 25 days. So 21 to 25 out of 30 days, this naked put will lose 90% of its value. And that's where I think it might make sense, instead of waiting for the other 5 days to make the last 10% of the credit collected on that naked put, maybe it makes sense to close it out as once it reaches 90% max profit, and put ourselves in the position where we're left over with the put debit spread completely paid for. Even if I was to close out early, right? Let's say if I was to, maybe this is too early, right? It's only been 11 days and there's 19 days left, and the naked puts here only lost half of their value. But if I was to close these naked puts right now, you can see that, I would be left over with a 100 point wide put debit spread at a net cost of about $50 or $60, right? So I would have very little risk left for this put debit spread. Now, again, I'm not saying that we need to close at 50%. I would wait longer. I will give this another week, 2 weeks. let's see what happens in the next 2 weeks. I think in the next 2 weeks, I probably will be able to close this for under $1, maybe. Right. At that point, I would consider closing it out just to leave myself in this position of holding a 100 point wide put debit spread that has no cost. Right. So this leaves me with a completely paid for put debit spread. Now, this put debit spread for the next 120 days is going to serve as a hedge for other trades that I'm going to put on, right, as this trade develops. Let's say in the next 2 weeks, I close out the 53.50 and I put on another trade, which is going to be a 112. But now I have a 1-1 from the new trade plus this 1-1. So this is two put debit spreads with two naked puts for the new trades, right? So now I have more put debit spreads that are going to be guarding or hedging my newer 1-1-2s. Right. So that the only difference between what I did before and to what I'm doing now is that I'm going to put my put debit spreads 150 DTE and I'm going to look to sell the naked puts at 30 DTE. The benefit is that I'm going to be left over with the put debit spreads that have a lot of time until expiration, and I'm going to be able to build on these put debit spreads, right? Because if I campaign this trade and every 30 days I have a 100 point wide or a 150 or 200 point wide put debit spread, right? If I start this at 150, after first 30 days, I have a put debit spread paid for that has 120 days. 30 more days go by after the second trade rolls off. Now I have two put debit spreads. One is going to be at 90, the other one is going to be at 120, and so on and so forth. So I probably will be able to build maybe, it all depends if you start with 150 and every 30 days you have naked puts coming off, you'll have, five puts in rotation, five put debit spreads guarding one set of naked puts. All right, so that's the idea. The idea is to use this as your income strategy, right? The income comes from the naked puts part, and it always did. And it also goes not just to generate income, but also to pay off the cost of this put debit spread that's going to serve as a hedge for newer trades that are going to come online. Right? So that's the idea. That's the 1-1-2. Now, I know this risk graph is, it may not be familiar to you, but this is not much of a difference than, a regular 1-1-2. The reason why it looks this way is because our naked puts, the naked puts are closer in time. So this is kind of a weird diagonal risk graph. But as far as the T+0 line, it doesn't really change a whole lot. Right. And if you want to, take a look at a standard 1-1-2 and compare the T+0 to this, it's going to, the T+0 is going to be very similar. And, one more thing I want to say, guys, is that, please do not, try to not confuse, but try to pin one trade against the other. For example, if I'm doing a 1-1-2 this way, this is not the way to do it and everything else is wrong, right? If Tom King is doing his trades at 120 DTE and I'm doing them at 150 DTE, it doesn't mean that he's right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and he's wrong. It doesn't matter. You have to do what works for you. That's the point, right? And then, we get questions sometimes. So, how do I know when I do 120, or how do I know when I do 150? How do I know when I go calendarized versus putting everything all in the same expiration cycle? What I want to say about this, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but what we do in this community, right, is we're showing you how we're doing these things, right? And this is like I don't know, all you can eat buffet, right? Like you walk in, and who's to say what you want? You go and you pick and you choose what you like, what you want, what you need, right? If who's to say that 120 DTE on the put debit spreads works better than 150 DTE? You have to figure out what works best for you. And that's the right thing to do. Right. So don't try to, label these trades such as, oh, LT 112 is different than what you're suggesting. And I try to not label these as such, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. You can label them whatever you want, but you just want to understand, um, the benefit of doing 150 versus 120, right? There's extra 30 days. You're probably going to pay for it, so it's going to come out of your income portion of the trade, right? There's gives and takes and everything. And I don't know, I don't have enough data to tell you that, 120 DTE is more profitable in a declining market versus 150 DTE. I have no idea. And I don't think it makes a big difference. To me, I know what my goal is, and my goal is to have as many leftover put debit spreads, because if the market is going to go down, right, these put debit spreads provide a delta hedge for me, right? I know that everybody's super sensitive right now to, the volatility and all that, but I don't expect volatility to blow out the way it did in August, every month or every 6 months. It may happen. I don't know. I don't plan for it. I do want to be aware that, I need to have something in place in the event this happens. But I think that I am more so looking for a delta hedge than a vega hedge. So if I have trades that start off with a 150 DTE versus those that start with 120 DTE, in the end, 120 DTE put debit spread campaign will just have one less put debit spread. That's the difference for me. I don't know what that translates into P&L and dollars and whatever, but I just know that if you start at 150 DTE and you're selling 30 DTE puts against it, you just have one more cycle in the 150 DTE campaign. Right? That's as simple as I could possibly make it. So the idea here is to, let's just recap real quick, and I apologize for going off the rails a little bit here, but the idea is to start the put debit spread 150 DTE. We're doing it a 100 point wide put debit spread. The put debit spread is probably going to be somewhere around delta 25, and we're looking to pay about $15 debit for it. And then the naked puts are going to be somewhere around 30 DTE. Does it have to be 30? If there's no 30 available, but there's 31 or 32, by all means, right? Those work just as well. So a 30 DTE naked puts are going to be somewhere around delta 7, maybe 10. And we're just looking to collect the same dollar amount that we're paying for the naked, for the put debit spreads, right? So if we bought put debit spreads for $15 debit, we want to sell two naked puts for that same $15 credit. So the first $15 will go to pay off the cost of the put debit spread, and the second $15, that's your income portion. Right? So this was about, right? So my net credit was 625. It wasn't $750. I just placed my naked puts a little bit further out of the money. Why? I don't know. Maybe because when I put this trade on, I thought the market was going to roll over. No, I was wrong. So I took less credit, gave myself a little more safety. But you know what? It doesn't matter. My goal is to generate income here in the first 30 days, and then hopefully market doesn't fall out of bed, and we are left with a fully paid for put debit spread. And then I'm going to put on another trade. Hopefully 30 days goes by, nothing blows up. I will be left with two put debit spreads. Put another one on, 30 days goes by. Now I'm going to have three put debit spreads, right? So I'm going to build on these put debit spreads, and I'm going to look to um, start to scale this strategy a little bit more. Instead of doing 1-1-2s, I'm going to try to increase the ratio. And that takes me to another trade idea, which is very similar, right? And if we just, let me go back real quick and talk about, we can look at an example of this trade, and we can build a new trade that, let's say, if I wanted to put on this 112 that I just described, um, but based on today's prices, right? So I'm going to go and maybe I will start with the put debit spread, right? So I need to go out somewhere at about 150 DTE. Um, there's probably a date when there's always a 150 DTE. I just go to the closest that there is. So we have 140 and we have 160. If I go with 140 and I said in this presentation, I said 150, does it mean that 140 is wrong? No, right? You can use 140. You just have to know that, using a 140, you don't have that 150 DT on the put debit spread. So that cycle of having five 30-day cycles in the 150 DTE is going to be slightly off, but you can make up for it. But for today's example, let's just use the 28th of Feb options with 140 DTE. And as I said, we're going to look for a put debit spread that's going to be somewhere around maybe delta 25, right? So let's say 5,500. I'm going to buy one. I'm going to sell a put 100 points lower. So from 55 down to 5,400. That's my put debit spread. What is it going for? It is going for $14.75. Okay, good. Right. So we're looking for about a $15 debit, give or take. If it's 16, is it wrong? No. If it's, 12, maybe you can push it a little bit lower or a little bit higher, but get within a $15 debit. That's a guideline, guys. This is not a make it or break it for the strategy. So that's my put debit spreads, 100 points wide. What if I did a 200 wide? I would, if I kept the strikes right exactly where they are, a 200 point wide is going to cost more, which means that if, I will need to either sell my naked puts closer to recover that additional debit that I'm paying because I'm widening my strikes from 100 points to 200 points. But you can do whatever you want. That's the best part about these trades. You do what works for you. You can do 300 points wide. If you don't want to spend more, well, guess what? Can you find a 200 point wide put debit spread for 15 bucks? Yes. Right? You'll just have to place your strikes farther out of the money, which means that there is a lower probability of the price hitting your trap, right? So your 200 wide is going to be farther out of the money, which still works. You just have to do what works for you. Um, I think that, for right now, I'm going to do these 100 wide at around 25 delta for about a $15 debit, right? And then we're going to go to about 30 DTE, and we're going to look for a put to sell or two for a $15 credit. So we don't have 30 days, we have 31 days. 31 days will work just as well as, and there it is, right? So a $15 debit would be $15 debit. So we have 52.75 for 15.50, or we have 52.50 for 14.75. Is one better than the other? Doesn't matter, right? Let's try 52.75. It's a 7.64 delta, and we're selling two of these. This is my risk graph, and you could model this on your brokerage platform to see what it looks like. Option Explorer will not show us what the buying power requirement span margin is. Um, let's talk about for a second what this trade goes for. So this trade goes for about 16.50 or maybe $16. Let's just round this off to $16. We know that ES options have a multiplier of 50, so we are collecting not 1600, we're collecting 800. Right, so 800 is what we're going to make. That is our income portion, right? Income portion of this trade is $800. If 30 days goes by and nothing blows up, we'll make $800, assuming that the naked 52.75s expire worthless. This should leave us with a 100-point wide put debit spread at a net credit of $800, which means that over the next 110 days, right, we have to back out 30 days from this 140, right, we'll be left with a 100-point wide put debit spread with 110 days to go. And if 110 days goes by and the market never goes down enough to hit this put debit spread, these options will expire worthless. And all we will have kept is the $800 that we had collected for this trade initially. Right? So that's the idea. So the income portion comes on the first 30 days, and then we're left with a hedge to protect newer positions that we're going to build on to this put debit spread. Can you go ahead and sell another, right? Can you sell another naked put to further increase your credit? Yes, you can, but you got to figure that out for yourself. I can't tell you what you should do, right? If you're going to set up these as, in a campaign style, and you're going to do these every week or every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, however often you want to do it, I don't want, so if I know that, in the next 2 weeks, I have another 112 coming, when this naked put comes off, I don't need to go ahead and replace it because I will replace it just in a new 112 trade, right? So this leftover put debit spread, I want to leave it alone and I want it to do its part. It's going to hedge or provide delta hedge for my newer trades. And it should potentially, it should relieve some of the buying power requirement for newer trades as well, because you will have a much smoother overall T+0. I'm not exactly sure how much relief it's going to provide, right? Different brokers use different formulas to figure out their span margin requirements. I can't tell you exactly. I don't want to give you my guesstimate because it may be wrong, and I don't want to mislead anybody. But you definitely want to check in and look on your platform, right, to monitor, right? Like, for example, if you're doing this in a campaign style, you have one leftover put debit spread. Take a look at what a new 112 will take up as far as margin goes. And then when you have two leftover put debit spreads, take a look at what the new 112 will take up as far as buying power requirement goes. And you'll get an idea how much buying power relief you're getting from every one additional 100-point wide put debit spread. Right. And of course, we want to talk about, well, what happens if, things don't go as planned? Do we use a stop loss here? I think that because we're on such a short time frame here with 30 days, there aren't too many options available. One thing you don't want to do is you don't necessarily want to wait for your naked puts to go in the money, because the way things work when, the market, if these are at 7 delta and you wait for them to get to like a delta 50, that means the market is falling out of bed. We have moved probably 10% relatively fast, right? 10% in 30 days, that's fast, right? For normal markets. 10% in 30 days is a lot. So what's going to happen is volatility is going to get jammed on the front month, which means that your cost to buy these, if you're going to roll them down and out, your cost to buy these is going to be a lot more than what you will collect by rolling these out in time. Maybe you want to buy yourself an extra 3 weeks, maybe an extra month or whatever. The cost of rolling these nakeds is going to be too high if you let them go too far, right? Not even too far in the money, but if you let the price come down too far. So you kind of want to be on guard a little bit more with these short-term naked puts. Maybe, my rule of thumb was always, if your delta will double, like when I used to trade iron condors exclusively, and I would sell, 10 delta credit spreads, if my short strike delta would double, it's kind of like my wake-up call, like, hello, let's go. You do something. Like you need to start to consider adjustments. Maybe you're already making adjustments, but if you let this short strike delta get to 50 and only then you're going to start to look to make adjustments, well, adjustments are still possible, but they're just going to cost so much that it's going to put you in a position from which it'll take you a lot longer to recover from, or you can put yourself in the position where if everything else goes right after you make your adjustment, you're maybe going to break even, which is, it's not the end of the world, but you definitely want to be a little bit more proactive with these kind of trades. Right. So maybe if this doubles goes to 15 delta, maybe 20, it's your turn to start to say, okay, let me consider, maybe rolling this out for 2, 3, or 4 weeks, whatever. You want to roll sideways or slightly sideways, maybe down, and potentially collect the credit. You definitely don't want to pay a debit, right? So you want to kind of stay even on your rolls. You're extending your duration. You're going to be assuming risk for a little bit longer, right? But you don't have to take on additional risk. You're already taking on risk and time. You don't want to pay money and extend your duration. If in the end, if the trade becomes too painful, whatever that pain point is, if it's too painful, then you just got to close it out and move on. I did look at, again, naked puts at around delta 7 to 10. And not only did I look at how long it took for these puts to reach 90% of max profit, which was between 21 and 25 days, the P&L didn't look good at all during COVID crash. It did look okay during the 28 volatility event because that kind of came and went, right? Volatility always reverts. You just don't want to get squeezed out of your positions during those volatility events. And I think that these leftover put debit spreads are going to not solve all of our problems, but it's definitely going to help to keep things together and give us the time that we need to figure out how to roll our positions, how to make adjustments where we don't have to force close our positions in the middle of the night because volatility is exploding to the upside. Right. So I think that's what's going to help me, having those additional multiple layers of put debit spreads. That's what I'm shooting for right now. I'm going to obviously share all of my findings and results with you guys so we can, compare notes and figure out what works, what isn't. Is this it? Is this the holy grail? There isn't a holy grail here. You just have to make adjustments to your trading strategies and, improve over time, monitor your results, figure out, if something didn't go as planned and it was just, a one-off kind of, do you need to make drastic changes? Maybe, maybe not. But, if you identify something like, I didn't have enough put debit spreads like I did with these 112s. No, 112 is a great strategy. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about how great it is. Those that have been with us for a while, what these trades do in up and down markets. There is now a possibility of taking on a lot of pressure if you don't have enough put debit spreads. This is what I found. I'm just trying to figure out how to add more put debit spreads and still generate income in the meantime. So now, if I wanted to scale this trade a little bit more or a little bit faster, if I do this trade, I'm left with an extra one put debit spread after 30 days, which is great. You know what? And you could start these, but start slow, right? You can maybe look to scale after you have multiple layers of the leftover put debit spreads, or, right, we can go and look at another idea for this 1-1x, and that will be similar structure, except let me get rid of except this, so this was another 112 that I put on uh, the second 112, which is a two lot. It's a 224. And, this trade was put on at a slightly better time, if you will. Um, I think it was actually put on the next day after this trade, and the market was down. So I was able to place my strikes a little bit farther out of the money. I was looking for similar credits, and this one was 625 credit. This one was 1100, but it's also two lots. So very similar structure, very similar credits. Both risk graphs look very similar. And now with 10 days in the trade, let's see, I have 20 days left. My naked puts are now at 2 delta. And if we look at the original price was 1150, now they're at 4, so almost, two-thirds of juice has already come out of this. I'm not going to do anything about it just yet, but if I wanted to close these 4, this would leave me with a fully paid for 2 of the 100 wide put debit spreads, and they would be fully paid for. I would have no cost, right? I would give up the income that I'm making right now. So that's why I'm not going to close out these early. I'm going to wait another, out of 20 days, maybe another 3 weeks. And in the last couple of days, if they're, trading for, you know, 20 cents, 30 cents, I'll consider closing those. Um, so what I wanted to show you is another way to scale up these trades a little bit maybe faster, or how do we build on these leftover put debit spreads, but instead of waiting for 30 days to add one put debit spread, how do we speed things up a little bit more? And to me, the answer is just change the ratio of your put debit spreads to your naked puts. You may have to shift your strikes around until math makes sense, right? Your credit collected on how much buying power they take up and so on and so forth, or how much initial positive delta you take on. You have to play around with it. But the idea is, and again, this is a guideline, we're going to look to buy to open a 100 point wide put debit spread, right? And the put debit spread is going to be at around 15 delta. So remember, the first example was 150 DTE, 100 point wide at around 25 delta for about $15 debit. This one is also 150 DTE. It's also 100 point wide put debit spread, except I'm going to do 2 put debit spreads, right? So I'm increasing the number of put debit spreads from 1 to 2. I'm shifting my um, long leg of the put debit spread down from 25 delta to 15 delta. And I'm looking for a cost of this put debit spread to be somewhere about $9, maybe $10. Right. So 100 wide, 2 of these put debit spreads at 150 DTE for $9.50, maybe $10 debit, something like that. And then I'm going to finance these 2 put debit spreads by a sale of 3 naked puts, right? So now I have a 2-2-3 setup instead of a 1-1-2. This is a 2-2-3. So the ratio of the put debit spreads to naked puts is changing, where before it was a 1-1-2, right? 1 put debit spread, 2 naked puts. Here I have 2 put debit spreads and 3 naked puts, right? And I'm looking to sell the naked puts somewhere, maybe 8 or 10 delta. I'm looking to collect maybe $11 or $12 credit for the naked puts. We can model this trade and kind of see what that would look like. And I'm going to talk about why I think doing it this way could just speed up a little bit more on the way to building up the leftover put debit spreads. You do have to be aware the fact that, here now you have three naked puts. So you probably are going to be, a little more concerned with three naked puts, but you also have two put debit spreads instead of one. So if things really get bad and you're forced to make adjustments, those two put debit spreads instead of one put debit spread is going to provide you a little bit more relief in the event you have to close out those put debit spreads and use the profits from those two put debit spreads to compensate for any cost that you may have to assume when you roll your naked puts down and out, if you are in fact having to pay any kind of debit to make the roll. Again, we're going to use the 140 DTE for this example. So we're looking at a 100 wide, and we're going to place this 100 wide at around delta 15. So let's see what 5,200. So I'm going to buy one at 5,200. I'm going to sell one at 5,100. Sorry, this is two. It's two put debit spreads, not one. My apologies. So I have two put debit spreads, 100 points wide, and these are going for 875. Okay. So I said we're looking for something between $9 and $10. Will 875 work? That's close enough, right? It doesn't matter. And now we're going to look to sell three naked puts to pay for these two put debit spreads. Let's use the same November 11th expiration cycle with 31 days. And we're going to look to sell three naked puts. And we're going to go and look for something close to $11, maybe. How about 11? Right, so this is actually, and I think that because volatility in the 11 nov is slightly higher due to elections and whatever, but you can go as high as 5,200 maybe. Right, so we'll sell three of those, and here's where we are. Right, very similar looking risk graph. I hope you can see that. Very similar T plus 0 as a regular 112. Except now we have three naked puts decaying at 31 DTE. That's our income portion of this trade. Right? And then after these three naked puts expire, this will leave me with two, not one, but two 100-point wide put debit spreads. They are going to be farther out of the money, but there's two of them. So the trade-off really is having one 100 wide put debit spread closer at the money, right? I believe the other one we were looking at was somewhere around maybe 8% out of the money. This one is almost 11% out of the money. So having two put debit spreads or having one put debit spread, I don't really think it makes that big a difference unless you plan on capturing the profit inside of these put debit spreads. I would probably, if the market is going to move 9%, well, the one put debit spread, right, that's closer at the money is going to do a lot better than two put debit spreads that are 11% out of the money, because these two are going to expire worthless, whereas the one closer at the money is going to expire in the money. Right, so there's always the give and the takes, right? So would you prefer to have one put debit spread left over closer at the money, or would you rather have two put debit spreads also 100 points wide, but they're going to be a little bit further out of the money? It's really, I don't think there's right and wrong. It's whatever works for you. But the idea is, instead of having one leftover put debit spread, now you'll have two, assuming the first three naked puts expire out of the money and worthless. You can put on another trade. So now every 30 days or so, instead of stacking one put debit spread, you'll have two put debit spreads that are going to be further out of the money. Which one works best? I can't tell you, right? Because I think most of the time, these are going to all go to zero. You want to hope and pray that you don't capture any of this profit here. Now, if we do, if we get like a COVID type of a sell off, yes, the naked puts that are closer at the money are going to get into some trouble, right? But unless we go into something like a 2008 type of market where, we're going to be in a bear market for, and quite aggressive bear market for over a year, right? I think rolling these down, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, as soon as the market bounces, if you don't roll these naked options too far out in time, when the bounce comes, that premium is going to collapse, right? So you should be able to get out of that trade fairly quickly. So that's the idea, right? Very similar, right? A put debit spread financed by naked puts, right? One idea was a 112. This is a 223. Can you go 446? Yes, right? But understand how much buying power they'll take up. Understand, um, how much delta you're taking on initially. For example, this trade takes on, right, initial delta at 9. Oh, let's call this 10. Right. And then as we move higher, we are going to lose some of that delta, which is good, right? We're not, our upside is capped. We're not looking for profits from the move higher. As the market moves higher and as the time goes, you can see that my delta is going to start to decrease, which is great, right? That's what we want to see. We want to lose all that directional risk over time. And or if the market moves higher, we are losing that directional risk because as we're putting on new trades, we're picking up new directional risk, but older trades are going to get rid of some of that directional risk. All right. So, that's the general idea. I would suggest to start out small if you are going to adapt these trades. Don't go all in doing a 5, 5, 10, putting them on every 3 days. And, just because, look at the risk reward here. This setup 223, you collect 1,000, let's call this $1,000. You collect $1,000 worth of premium for the next 30 days. I think, and somebody wants to double check and let me know if I'm right or wrong, but I think the margin for this trade is somewhere around 15 to maybe 17, 18,000. Let's find a middle ground at 16,000, right? So, and it's again, if the market goes down, if volatility goes up, this margin is going to change. So don't take these numbers at face value and tell me you told me it's going to be X. It may not be. But as it stands right now, right upon entry into this trade, assuming that your margin isn't going to double or triple, if you're going to make $1,000 on the $16,000 of buying power requirement or span margin, right? 1,000 over 16,000 is about a 6.25%. See, 6.25% in 31 days. This is a fairly aggressive strategy, right? This isn't something that you want to stick in your IRA and walk away for 30 days. Like things can go wrong. We do have naked options here. So please, please be aware of that. But if everything goes right, assuming that, the back tests and all this other stuff is somewhat correct, if the naked puts will expire worthless about 95, maybe 9, let's call it 99 out of 10 will expire worthless. You have a very high probability of generating this income month after month after month. You do have to be aware that you have to be more responsive, right? You have to be more proactive. Monitor your naked puts. Again, as a rule of thumb, maybe when this delta doubles, right? If this delta is going to double from, 7 to 15, that's your wake up call. Does it mean that, it's time to, close the trade? Maybe. I don't know. For you, maybe. For someone else, you kind of want to say, all right, what's happening in the market? Get a context of, whatever is going on that's causing this delta to go from 7 to 15, right? And then figure out, all right, if this goes to 20, 22, I'm going to have to make a move. I'm going to do X, whatever that X is. Maybe you're rolling down and out 1 week. Maybe you're rolling down and out 2 weeks. You don't want to extend this, down and out 120 days, which will probably be the best case from, how much um, room you will get out of the money. Meaning, if you were to roll this 5,200 down and out for even money from 30 days to 120 days, you'll probably put this naked put from 5,200 down into, mid 4,000 somewhere, 4,600 maybe, which gives you a lot more safety, but you have to be in the trade for another 120 days. A lot more bad things can happen in 120 days, right? So you don't want to extend it too far out. You want to stay relatively close until expiration, because again, once the bounce or whatever is causing the market to go down or whatever is causing the volatility to go up, that's pushing your deltas higher, once that goes away, or at least the speed at which market is moving against you is going to change, this premium is going to collapse. Right? So you don't want to roll too far out in time. You kind of want to stay tight. You want to make adjustments where you don't have to pay any more money. If you are paying money, maybe you're selling some of those put debit spreads that you're building, right? You're building them for a reason, right? If those put debit spreads that you're building, they're profitable and you're facing a cost, or you have to pay to make the roll on your nakeds, start, removing some of those put debit spreads to pay for it. And that's a general idea. And I know everybody wants, give me the rule. If A, then B equals C, then blah, 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 blah. I don't want anybody to live by something that I'm going to write down. I would rather you be able to look at your situation, because if I choose 5,200 for my naked puts and you choose 5,000 for your naked puts, guess what? Our adjustments are going to be different, because I don't know if the market goes down 200 points. My 52s are going to be in a lot more trouble than your 5,000 naked puts. Right. So there's no two adjustments that are the same. But as long as we both have the same general idea, then we can both execute and manage our trades to success. All right. So I know that we went on for quite a bit and I said a lot of things. I'm pretty sure you guys have a bunch of questions, and um, I'm going to try to see if there are any. Hey, Tom, I know you're on. If you have something to add, if you want to, if you have some questions you see that I might not see. Um,
Yeah, so I think Stacy's got a good question, and I'll just give my quick 2 cents on it. I mean, I like to trade, and obviously I use this as my most recent campaign version of the long-term 112. I just calendarized it. Uh, and again, the goal was, for me, my goal is always income. But I think if you can get income at the same time that you can build a little bit of this put debit spread wall thing, I think that's not bad. I have not really settled on whether the 30-day 150 on the PDS or the 60-day 150 on the PDS works better for me. Obviously, I like being out in 30 days, but obviously you have to go a higher delta to make a decent income,
mhm.
unless you're going to, or if you're trying to make X amount of income in your portfolio, you've got to figure out where else can I get that from if I'm willing to take less income on this trade. Maybe I don't need to make so much money from these trades because I can make it on other things. Then obviously you can take less risk, or maybe you have to go to 60 days. But I like the fact that you're sitting on a put debit spread for a long time. Stacy's question is, and there's some validity here, is do you think that put debit spread is going to help you enough when the naked puts are gone and you have 120 days left, will a 120-day 100 wide put debit spread give you much help versus a 30-day put debit spread or a 60-day put debit spread? Uh, because it's much farther out in time. How much relief is it giving you that far out? And I think when you go to
Right.
100 wide, which is what we've been doing, 100 wide to me is better than the 50. And because I'm farther out and I'm paying for it with the shorter term, I'm still campaigning these roughly every 2 weeks. I want to still generate the income I need from these trades. But will that put debit spread, even though we get a bunch of them on, some are going to be at 30, some at 60, some at 90, some at 120. Do the ones at 120 give you much benefit if the market starts to go down 120 days out? Is that,
Yeah,
so
I think this is a great question, and if I wish there was a way to quantify different scenarios and tell you which one will work best. There's just one moving part or one known unknown is how far is the market going to go down and how fast is it going to go. I do know, right? If we're just comparing apples to apples, if you have a 100 wide at 30 days left and 100 wide with 120 days left, I would rather have a 120 days left because of that extra time. I think it's going to be a little bit more responsive. I think it's going to I think it's going to increase potentially in value a little bit more. So if we're comparing a 100 point wide put debit spread with 30 days to go and it's 10% out of the money versus the same exact 100 wide um, put debit spread with 120 days to go and also 10% out of the money, the one that is farther out in time is going to be more responsive. It's going to increase potentially in value a little bit more, helping me offset my potential costs of having to roll my naked puts. That's my idea. I think that, you know, it's more obvious the outcome of a 100 wide, 10% out of the money with 30 days. It's probably unlikely that, anything is going to come out of that trade if the market isn't moving fast enough. But because you have 120-day in the other put debit spread, right, there's more time, there's more uncertainty. I think that 120, 150 DTE put debit spread that's left over and fully paid for is going to provide a little bit more than a 30 DTE put debit spread. And also, I think I'm more so interested in these put debit spreads, not so much to, help me completely cover all of my losses. Yes, I know that I'm going to have to figure out how to, roll my nakeds if I'm still in those, um, roll them to safety and potentially, compensate if there's a debit on the roll, compensate for that debit by selling some of these put debit spreads. But I think the main role for these put debit spreads is they're going to not just increase in value, but they're going to hold margin right from blowing out.
yeah.
I think
All
they're
right.
going to
So
provide some relief on the buying power as the market goes down. And the more
so
you
I just
have,
like
the
the
better
fact.
you are off.
Yeah, I agree. I like the fact that you just have them on longer. I mean, normally with the 120-day 112 that we've been doing whatever for, a couple of years now, is it takes 75% of the time to get to like 90%
Hmm.
premium, which means I got to wait 90 days for the naked puts to come off, and I only enjoy a put debit spread for 30 days. Now we're enjoying it for 120 days. And previously we were stacking naked puts, which is what got us a bit because quantity matters. Well, now you're not going to have anywhere near the quantity of naked puts because if they're coming off, whether you use 30 or 60 days, either way, they're going to come off in half or more than, or even faster than you had before. So instead of having 6 trades working out of 8 that have naked puts on them, that are 112, so twice the naked puts, 6 of those working out of the 8. Now you're really only going to have 2 of them working out of the 8. So you're, even though maybe you have a higher delta and a little bit more risk, you have, let's just say you were doing a 112. Let's not worry about 224s or anything like that. A 112, doing them every 2 weeks means you would have 6 of these working over time, which means you'd have 12 naked puts. Well, on a 112 campaign. Well, now the same 112 campaign, because they're calendarized, if you want to use that word, now I only have maybe 2. So now I'm only sitting on 2 naked puts, even though it's a higher delta, and they're going to get beat up. I mean, 2 puts is better than 12. Or I'm sorry,
Hmm.
4. Let's say we have 2 trades on. Four naked puts is a lot less than 12, which means you should really start to see an improvement in your risk profile. And on top of the fact that you've got 1/3 of the original naked puts that we used to have on, so you've only got 1/3 of them on. Imagine what that would have done to help us in August. And then you have 3 times as many put debit spreads on at the same time. So you have a third less, or 1/3 of the naked puts, and you have 3 times as many put debit spreads on. So my goal here is to see if maybe I can avoid paying for a 14 DTE hedge, or I can cut that down because now I have more protection for more time. And I think that's, for me, that's the benefit of them.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary. And, in the end, just think of it like this, right? So if we have 150 DTE where we start with the put debit spreads and we have naked puts at 30, right? So we'll have the put debit spreads will expire in 150 days. We have, let's call it 5 30-day cycles, right? Does everybody agree with that math? 150 DTE on the put debit spreads, 30 DTE on the naked puts on the front month. We have 5 cycles. So technically, by the time we have the first set of the put debit spreads expire, we will have, right? We'll have 5 sets of put debit spreads and only 1 set of the naked puts. So we essentially will potentially have 5 put debit spreads for every 2 naked puts, right?
And if these new, really quick, if the new naked puts are too high of a delta that makes you really uncomfortable, then go to 60 days. You still are going to have half the naked puts and twice as many put debit spreads.
Right. And that's exactly right. And that's why, again, like I said, I don't like to label things and write them down as, hard and fast rules, but do what works for you. Try it with 30 DT because again, we should all understand and know that options that have less time until expiration are a lot more sensitive to price changes, to volatility changes, right? Unless they're too far out of the money where none of this stuff matters. But, you know, just, looking at from a DTE standpoint, if 30 DTE makes you uncomfortable and 30 DTE options naked going to take up more buying power. So that's another angle we can kind of look at that if you go with 60 DTE on the front month naked options, you'll have to put up less buying power, which will essentially increase your potential return on buying power requirement or return on margin, right? So there's always the give and takes. It'll take you longer to expire those 60 DTE if you compare them to 30 DTE, but on the flip side, you get less buying power requirement and you get a lot less P&L volatility on the front month. See that?
Yeah, and these 30-day naked puts at a 112, they take up a boatload of
They
buying power. So,
they do. They
they're
do.
going to take up a lot more buying power, almost 3 times as much buying power as if you had done it at 120. Still going to be probably 2 times or not quite as much as at 60 days. So definitely going to take up a lot more BP, but you're going to have less of them on.
And if you want to look at velocity, right, at how fast are you turning over these trades, right? every 30 days versus every 60 days, you may have to put up more buying power for 30 days. But if you churn the same BP twice in the same, you could get into this, down this rabbit hole to figure out what works best. And this is a really good example why everybody should, you know, model these trades, look at your BP, look at your risk, look at your reward, look at your credits, look at your debits, all of that, move slices around on your screen if you're using Tastytrade or the Thinkorswim, and figure out what works best for you, right? We all know that if you're gaining something, it's usually at a cost of something else. Maybe it's more buying power, maybe it's more time until expiration, whatever the case is. But you want to understand there's two sides. You gain something and you lose something. Not lose as in, you lose on a trade or you lose money, but you're gaining something at the expense of something else. So find your perfect balance. Find what works for you. We're just here giving you the tools that you have to use in order to build your trading business. And we're putting ideas forward. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, great. We can all talk about it, respectfully disagree on different objects, subjects, or whatever. And I want to encourage everybody to not just hold it in, or be afraid to say something. If you have something to say, if you have a question, if you don't agree or you don't understand, we have a chat channel and Discord. Go there, put your questions there. We have a lot of very experienced, very knowledgeable traders that are going to jump in, and hopefully this will open the conversation. And as things evolve, and if as market changes, this is how I'm looking to do things for right now. Is this going to be the way I'm going to do things 6 months from now? I have no idea. But guess what? I will be the first to tell you if I'm making changes, just like Tom is doing, just like anybody else who's contributing to our community. If something changes, we're going to keep you updated about what we're doing different, why we're doing it, and hopefully we all get better over time and find success in what we're doing.
And right now, too, these put debit spreads are going to do not a whole lot for you right away. But again, when you start to stack them up, they are reducing your theta. They are, positive vega trades. So they're giving you the benefits longer of what you're looking for, which is lower theta. Okay, or not lower theta, but lower delta. So they're delta neutral, delta short trades, delta negative trades. They're positive vega trades. So if volatility does spike uh, on these, they also act pretty doggone good uh, when we're looking at these things. So on a volatility spike on these, if you model that piece out, okay, now you start to really see that these are also, on a 10% or so increase in volatility, they start to help out a whole lot more than with even though without the market moving or even getting into the trap. Now, instead of not doing anything on volatility, they're going to start to help out. So I think it helps you on both ends. Adds a little vega, gives you some negative delta. And I think overall that's what you want to see, as long as you're not, for me, I just don't want to sacrifice income. So I still need to generate income from these. Otherwise, I got to find income other places. And right now it's not easy. Okay? I don't love a lot of the trade opportunities that are out there. So I'm not seeing much in gold and copper. I mean, oil is okay. I don't mind trades in oil. Bonds, a little funky, but I'm not seeing a ton of opportunities. So I got to make money from somewhere. So I still want to generate income. I'm not going to sacrifice my income. But for Igor, he may be, have other things that he's trading, and these provide really good help for other trades that you may want to put on.
Yeah, I think that leftover put debit spreads, again, it's all about how you view them, right? They could be a part of the wall, if you will, what you need in order to be able to continue to put um, undefined risk trades. You can also, again, the way I see them, and I hate to, break things up, and I think the most important piece is not to um, fall into like this false sense of security, thinking that, oh, I have these put debit spreads, so I can just do reckless stuff, and nothing bad is going to happen. Or if you account, oh, I you know what, I can sell some nakeds here, I have those put debit spreads, and I'm also going to be able to sell some nakeds there because I have those put debit. Like, you have to know the number of put debit spreads that you have, and you could only sell so much against it. Right? Don't leave your ratio of one put debit spread for every one naked put. It doesn't do anything. For me, the goal is to have as much as I possibly can. If I can have a ratio of maybe, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, that's great. Can I go down in that ratio as low as 1 to 3, one naked put for three put debit spreads? I think that will still work. Once you cut, you know, into like one naked put for every two put debit spreads, those two put debit spreads aren't going to do a whole lot to save your naked puts in the event that, the market is going to freak out, volatility might explode, and so on. So, are the naked puts going to save you from, taking losses? Maybe not, right? In the near term, you still have to figure out how to um, potentially roll your naked options on the shorter time frame to safety. But the put debit spreads will, for me at least, provide the bridge and help with buying power requirement going through the roof, potentially, going negative, right? The way it did on August 5th. Is that how it's going to play out? Again, the known unknown is how high is the volatility going to rise, and how fast is the market going to go down, or how much the market's going to go down. We don't know these things. We can try to implement and put things in place that in theory should help us. I think having extra put debit spreads is definitely going to help with buying power from going upside down. And if you can just control your buying power, give yourself enough time to figure out how to roll your nakeds to safety, I think that's definitely going to be one more step in the right direction. And if this isn't enough, we're going to continue to figure out ways, right? We haven't touched on, the Vega hedges and some other Delta hedge ideas. We're going to bring these more and more to light, and, hopefully give you guys enough tools to be able to put things together and make things work for you.
Yep.
All right. I know
Good
that,
stuff.
go ahead.
No, it's just good stuff. We can talk more in Discord on it, but I think it gives you time to figure things out. And if you want to roll, you roll. You still have 120 days. You can keep rolling those naked puts to get them back into the original expiration if you have to. So you've got opportunities to roll. As
One
well, if
more.
the thing doesn't come off in 30 days, great. Roll it out another 30. It's still only a 60-day trade as opposed to 120. So I think you have more options this way. And then you can also, Chuck put it in there a little bit. I don't want to get into it because I know we got to jump. But if the market does move higher, there's nothing that says you can't take off the short puts of the PDS at 90% at 60 days. And now you have just sheer long puts
Yes.
for 60 days left.
Yes.
So, instead of, because you couldn't do that before when you only had 30 days left, it was hard to make those adjustments. Now, if the market moves higher, you can roll, you can take off the shorts of the put debit spread if the market's drifting higher. And now you can really have a lot of long puts.
I think that is a great idea. And we only have so much time, but we are going to talk about all these things as time, goes on, and we'll have more of these meetings. We can talk about, in great detail, things you can do. You can turn a put debit spread into a flat out black swan hedge for sure. There are many ways we can, potentially make adjustments. Again, we just need to weigh in the benefits and the costs of these benefits. And if it makes sense, hey, once you have a put debit spread that's fully paid for, and if you wanted to cover the short leg of that put debit spread, as long as, again, you're gaining this unlimited downside Vega hedge now, but it's going to come at a cost, right? It's going to put drag on your overall performance. But if you could generate 6% a month doing these trades, I think there is room to give up some of that income in exchange for some of these, Vega hedges if you're going to turn these put debit spreads. But we'll save that for next time. I'm going to jump. Thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks for your time. Have a good weekend. If you have any questions, you can post them on Discord. Would love to get into these discussions a little bit more with you guys. Again, enjoy the weekend. And if you are going to fast this weekend, have a meaningful and easy fast. And until next time, guys, trade them well. We'll see you later.